Sometimes I worry that the answers I embrace are too simple. Can we ever truly fully understand the divide between our biology and our intellect? How much is nature? How much is nurture? If my intellectual capabilities and my knowledge were replicated in a machine, would that machine be me? Would it be human? And what would be more humbling to my ego? If the answer was yes, or if the answer was no? What if I'm making too many assumptions? But there's no time to worry about my ego now. There's work to be done.
The atmosphere of this place is incredible. All of these cliffs. I have to say this is my favourite room so far. From the very first moment I saw that this game's engine could support puzzles that were all part of one big interconnected mass, I've hoped for something like this, where even though you're inside the puzzle, you feel connected to the rest of it. It feels open. The puzzle itself is similar to ones we've seen before, where we need to raise a connector up high so that it can reach over the tops of walls. This is the first time, I think, that it combines it with the isolated jammer theme, concept, mechanic? Structure. Structure's probably the right word. I suppose this is the first time I've really felt in awe of what the game is displaying to me. This puzzle doesn't seem like it was placed down by someone. It seems like it just happens to exist on the side of a mountain. But I think I said that before, I'm someone who puts immense value in height differentials to really sell a location. And this is probably just my own experience talking. I live somewhere with a lot of hills, and everywhere I go somewhere else in the country, and most places in the country are quite flat. I feel bad, I feel like they're missing out. So here I haven't quite got into the habit of spamming my connector on every receiver in view, but by the end of this video it'll be well ingrained. At this first attempt I missed something that should have been really quite obvious. The log files this time around don't have an awful lot to discuss in them, so I'll only bring them up when I've got nothing else to say. I was quite surprised by the height of this. I regret now not launching myself up there to try and get an overview. But for now, I missed the receiver on the second barrier over here. Here the landscape is finally overshadowing the puzzle design. I'm too distracted to think properly. That wasn't so bad. These puzzles are extremely neat, considering how many components there are. I'm quite happy to leave the connector up in the air. I'm amazed there's no way to utilize it in other puzzles, considering how visible it is. So Sheep has somehow managed to anger Milton to the point that he refuses to communicate. I'm sure I've pushed his buttons quite a bit so far, but it doesn't seem to have come close to that. Sheep has probably been the most curious and questioning program we've seen out of all of them. So, if that was enough to anger Milton, I don't stand a chance. I hope Milton's able to keep it straight which program he's talking to at the time. I guess he's using the memory reserved for archiving to retain details on all of us, which, from what we've read, is as good as limitless. I couldn't find anything to say that would fit in with their conversation. Not the first time that's happened to me. Actually, I deliberated over this far too long. I like to think it's because I want to derive some sort of comedy from all this. There is definitely a sense of trying to have a unique voice and identity among all of these messages, and given such restricted choices. Eventually I found one that addresses what they're talking about, but in a, I think there's something strange going on kind of way. So instantly this is extremely similar to the previous puzzle. More of a different flavour of the launch the connector into the air to connect to everything genre. This one's best summed up with 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So let's talk about what Alex was talking about. She brings up the difference between biology and intellect, and tries to map those to nature and nurture. I guess in this case, biology would be nurture, and intellect is kind of your inherent intelligence, your natural abilities. So if a machine came along that had all of your knowledge and intellect, would it be you? Well, it's the same question we've been asking since back in Greece. What defines a person? But there's a new perspective to be gained, oddly enough, by making it all about us. How much, aside from my knowledge and intellect, makes me, me? I guess I'd have the same idiosyncrasies. If I was paralysed from the neck down, I guess I would be indistinguishable. So Stephen Hawking them with the synthesized voice and all. If he wheeled out something that spoke in the same way, in the same voice as him, what's the difference? Well, Alex then asks a question about ego that she's too busy to answer right now. But the question is, if they were the same, or if they weren't, which would be more humbling to her ego? Well, we've got all the time in the world, so let's think about that. If people I worked with, were brought into a test centre, and there were 2 chambers, one of which contained me, one of which contained a robotic doppelganger, and they were asked to communicate to them individually without knowing which was which, and they couldn't guess which one was me. Maybe I'd be quite proud that my intellect and knowledge shone through, even when it wasn't attributed to my physical body. On the other hand, maybe I'd be resentful that it was so easy to duplicate. I guess I'd just be suspicious of the whole process right from the start. There are lots of peculiarities to the way I type, email, speak out loud, fall to pieces when trying to speak on the phone, that if I saw them communicating with this robotic self, if it managed to pull off all those peculiarities, I'd probably defer to it entirely, because it sounds like something monstrously difficult to pull off. By the same token, if it didn't manage to pull off all of my nuances, and they were suckered into it anyway, I'd be a bit resentful, probably of the people. There are lots of examples of this, but the book, The Double, which was made into a film called Enemy, features a man who finds out he has an exact double, stalks him, confronts him, that sort of thing, and in the end, the double ends up sleeping with his girlfriend. How bland must their relationship be? How lacking in personal interactions? If my own personal Jake Gyllenhaal was replaced, I am absolutely adamant that I would know within seconds. So I'd have to say, if a doppelganger managed to fool everyone I know, I'd be immensely humbled. If they saw through it, I'd probably think that should be the natural state of things, and that wouldn't have much effect. If they realised the difference, but then decided that they preferred the alternative anyway, that'd never happen. So back with the puzzle, the trickiest thing to come to terms with is that I need two connectors right at the start in order to send one into the air. It can't do it by itself. But at least now I have a third one, so I can get to work not using it effectively. Thwarted once more. Actually, it's more of a continuous thwarting. A perpetual thwarting machine, if you will. Not entirely sure what was getting in the way of this laser. Anyway, I need to somehow hit this receiver over here, and the latest one that I've found, at the same time, with one connector, which you may recognise as being an impossible bending of the laws of the more robust areas of this video game's physics. See if you can work out the solution while I ditch the whole fan concept and try and weave a path between the walls themselves. Here's a hint. I brought it up last episode as a thing that these laser puzzles are going to start doing from now on. There's one fairly nice failsafe with the whole doppelganger notion. Suppose the doppelganger comes along and says, "Hey, I saw that you had all these inefficiencies in your life and I've improved upon them, and now I'm exactly the same as you, but slightly better." But what they've done there is they have distanced themselves from the concept of you. They've done something you wouldn't have done, and sure, they might be a bit better, but then so were many people. So as long as that in itself doesn't bother you, it should be something you can cope with. There's also the argument that as soon as the doppelganger comes into being, nurture will kick in, and they'll instantly be a completely different being from who you are. So while they might go about their business just as you would, you might be filled with a crushing sense of hopelessness at witnessing a perfect copy of yourself getting on where you are not. In which case you're different people, so it doesn't really matter, though I'm kind of riding on a technicality there. So here I'm showing off my conundrum. I need to keep the barrier that I'm currently pointing at open, while having the barrier behind me open as well. So all I really had to do was keep this connector on this side, and close the barrier behind me when I went through. And that was effectively the solution, in case you were wondering. I told you making as many connections as possible would be a habit before the video was up. There you go, I pre-configured this connector to hold that door open for me, and now I can bring it round and open a further path. And there is still more to go. I'd been doing this puzzle for a while now, and I had other things to do, so I stared at the sky and paused the game for a bit. Flawless fade cut there. The end of this puzzle isn't actually that much more complicated. If you think about it, there's only one place this box could be any use at all, and that's on the switch right at the start. And the connector that's on the switch right at the start is doing nothing more than holding down that switch. So this box would be a perfect thing to substitute for if I took it all the way back there and rebuilt the puzzle from scratch. I'd then have one extra connector which I could use to open the barrier that I'm currently using for the jammer, and take the jammer with me to the final barrier. I've already done it once, so it wouldn't be that hard to do it again. But I'd taken a break by now, and I wasn't fussed, so this is what I did instead. Remember always to close doors behind you, and to exploit minor oversights. Two still to go, and I'd been saving the one up here. The hill has got more fortifications than the rest of the area, which feels a bit like a Mott and Bailey construction. Except they didn't need to create the hill because it was already there, and they didn't need a surrounding wall because there's a mountain instead. Still, everything's located in a sensible place. It feels believable. So much for it being well fortified. This is no defence against a fearless interloper with nothing to lose. And oops, I'm stuck. Cliff-based seppuku it is. I'm going to steal their box first though. Right, let's do this properly. We've got many different barriers with all sorts of... Oh, this is collect the components. Okay, never mind. Once more, there's an isolated jammer, but with a conspicuous fence next to it. And then suddenly the complexity ramps way up. This is more of that setup where the switch powers both the barrier that blocks the access to the fan and the fan itself. So I'm going to need to be extremely picky about what I send across, since a jammer or connector will need to ride a box, since I can't take it myself because the barrier won't let me through. And this receiver here, don't even pretend that I can link a laser to this receiver. It's nonsense. Great, I've got two connectors, now to find something to use them for. A hint, they're pointless for now. While I try and work out how to rescue that jammer, let's look at the first log file. It's another blog post. If I was paying more attention I might have worked out who was writing these by now, but never mind. They're basically saying, well, the world's ending, we haven't done very much. They regret spending so much time at the computer, not doing stuff, just sitting around, checking emails, reading pointless status updates by people they didn't like. But they don't regret the friends they made or the laughs they had. On the whole, everything's alright, have a nice end of the world. I sussed it, I'm so smart. But wait! I need a second box, otherwise I can't get back out. Well, I could get back out, but not with the jammer in tow. The solution for that's pretty great. Anyway, the blog post, I don't have much to say on it, apart from, yeah, it does take the time to soapbox a bit. While you're playing this game on your computer, it warns against spending too much time on the computer. But in the context of this blog post, the writer's got a platform. It seems like a natural way to put it, a series of regrets. There we go. And it fully accepts that great times can be had on the social medium of your choice. So I think it comes across alright. The tone is consistent in any case. Ooh, don't forget the other box. So with all the pieces, this puzzle unravels itself pretty nicely. So there's still this star to get, and a whole nother barrier to be opened. The two might be related. I tried a lot of different ways while I was here. I'm going to cut straight ahead to my most thoughtful attempt. It seems like this fence is too nicely positioned. If only you could get this connector on top of the box. There aren't really enough things around to be too selective here. I didn't realise I had a say in this. Once more, choosing I don't know would be uninteresting. Who said anything about rights? Of course the rocks can come if they're going to get destroyed otherwise. We need rocks. I'm not sure Milton agrees with my definition of a person, so I'll choose this. This again? Why am I making a choice here? Sure, I choose a person over a chihuahua, doesn't mean I should ignore all chihuahuas on principle. I should have just stuck with what I was saying. It doesn't really do to change his stance when no new information is coming in. But I kind of wanted to hear what he'd have to say about this one. Yes they are. So now I'm basically just conceding the point. I want to see where he's going with all this. It's cyclical. If you keep putting the same words in my mouth, I'm going to keep saying the same thing. Go, do we press the continue or the go back button? Oh, is that what this is all about? Why didn't you just say, Milton? I guess it's a far more clearer statement of my stance to invite him along, action speaking louder than words, even if in this case it's just more action-orientated words speaking louder than regular old words. Of course, it's still impossible to tell whether he's playing me or not. This is some more component collection, but it's not too bad. It basically means that the room is a bunch of little puzzles all joined together, but the puzzles serve to introduce you to what's happening inside the room, so there's a purpose to everything. This, though, is a fruitless endeavour, so on to the second log. It's more cant. I may have jumped the gun a bit by going on to the rest of his theses when the first one came up. I didn't realise they would come up later. This is the one about individuals working towards a greater whole. How puzzling yet necessary it is. If a species of animal possesses reason, in order to develop it to perfection, they must work as a species, as individually they are mortal, but as a species, immortal. I'm in the wrong ballpark, but it was worth a try. The secret text in this log file spells out evolution through iteration, iteration through play, which firstly applies quite nicely to game development. You have to play the levels over and over and over again, resulting in a more refined design, which is a type of evolution. But it's that notion of not only carrying out the process repeatedly that is the iteration, but the play. The word is very particular. As Alex said, play is one of the things humans do best, but you can apply it to anything. Tiger cubs learn by play fighting how to defend themselves and roughhouse in general. You might play around with different ingredients until out of the iterations comes a fully fledged meal, which you can then serve in a more serious environment. In other words, using an informal context as preparation for a formal context. If you're thrust into having to perform something that you've never done before, or to express something that you're not sure you'll know and have never tried to express before, it almost certainly won't come off as well as it could. And there's definitely an argument there for, say, if you're applying evolution to a presentation, the work that goes into making that presentation better is just work. It's not really fun in the slightest, because the pressure of the looming formal event is ever present. And therefore you end up with what people have always known, which is that if you can turn your work into something you do for fun, work is play, you're in a truly enviable state. So I've been a few boxes short this entire time. Now that I've got this box, I can access the box on top of the big stairs. And then I can get this started, yes sirree. Takes me a moment to work out that this will never be high enough as it is. It's been a while since I looked at the big stairs. All the boxes have spread to the furthest corners. It's a perfectly valid component of a puzzle game to force you to keep in mind where different pieces are. It's probably a part of the brain that's quite rarely exercised. I feel the need to defend it, because this is a bit obnoxious. know where I need to go, I just haven't quite gotten there yet. And it's so easy to leave bits behind. I keep doing that as well. Diagonal strafing is still faster, right? This is just a modified Half-Life engine. I'm on top of the big stairs. Right, third log file while I cart these all across. It's another of Ariana's blog. I think it's the one we saw in the demo. And it's titled, Holy Humble Brag, Batman! Which already puts me off to an edgy start. I'm not really sure what she's trying to say. She's attributing the virus wiping out humanity as if giving it biblical significance. God sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. She's finding it hard to accept that she is one of billions of people who God has seen come and go. She'd always considered herself humble, and now she's realising that she was very proud of being humble. And this is her acceptance of that oxymoron. I'm not sure what her being humble has to do with all of humanity being wiped out. Looks like she's equating being humble with having faith. I can't really argue with a subjective opinion, and she's dead now, so... We're playing Box Hunt. It's quite a satisfying way of going about a level. We tend to do more dispersing than we do creating. We now get to witness some of my attempts at getting this star. Plan number 1. Smuggle a box out of here and into the room right across the opposite side. All we have to do is circumvent this wall, which looks about as secure as those gates they put around docks. Alas, no. Cunning plan number 2, since the room across needs a blue laser, why don't we set up a blue laser here so that we can beam it all the way? Sometime later... Yeah, the angles are all wrong. I needed to make an S shape, and one of the connectors needs to start at the end of the S. I've only got 2 of them. Mad genius idea number 3, stack 2 boxes in lots of different ways and try and jump on them. Fourth daring escapade, finally find some use for the fact that I can jump on an angled fan. If there was a synonym for angled beginning with F, I would have used it. Useless. Brainwave number 5, why don't we put the boxes on top of the fan base, and voila. All that's left is to refrain from leaving the jammer up here, or I'd never be able to get out again. This plan is going right off the rails. I'm not going to look up the solution to this because I like doing things a bit creatively, but if I could guess, I'd say that since you can jump into this level from outside, the solution would be to somehow get a connector out from elsewhere or find one in the main part of the level and jump in with it. That is the most effort I've put into a star this entire game. It took at least half an hour, mainly because I did try and do it whatever the proper way is supposed to be to start with. A bit hesitant here, I wasn't sure where I was going to be next time. Floor 4 needs one more sigil, so we'll be just across the corridor. Looks like there'll be more platform jumping. The good kind of platform jumping, with bespoke purpose-made platforms.